Continuing on with the Bible, Romans, leaving or starting off where we left off last time. Please go line for line, but not too much, enough to give us some information, but not too long so that we can't go back and analyze it.
Romans 3 verse 1. What advantage then hath the Jew? Or what profit is there of circumcision? Verse 2. Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. Stopping.
Summary.
Paul asks, if it's all heart, why bother being Jewish? Then answers, the big win is you got God's words first, the scriptures, the promises. Outsiders didn't even know they were missing something. So yeah, huge edge, but doesn't mean you're safe.
So this is the big debate that gets echoed not only between the Jewish and Christian debate, but also through like Protestant and Catholic, which is going to be, well, if there's no point in following the laws, what have we been doing all this time? And then when it goes into the Catholic and Protestant debate, it tends to take the form of merit versus grace, where Luther is, a grace alone, we're saved by grace, and the Catholics want to be saying that, well, no, there's going to be some kind of works involved. And then the compromise seems to come out somewhere like, well, you will know someone by their fruits. So you would think that it's grace, we're all sinners, but you would think that you would be going towards good works as at least a good sign that maybe you're on, that maybe you've got some grace coming your way. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the same fight, different costumes. Paul starts it. If circumcision's nothing, why'd God ask for it? And the answer is, it wasn't nothing. It was a sign, a preview. God handed the Jews the script first, so everyone else could read along. But the script doesn't save you. Stepping into it does. Luther grabs that and runs. Grace alone. Nothing you do earns heaven, because doing is always dirty. Catholics push back. Fine, but if you're saved, you'll act saved. James 2. Faith without works is dead. No compromise. It's both and. Grace gets you in. Fruit shows you're growing. Not merit, mirror. Paul's not against works. He's against earning. The oracles weren't a ticket. They were a spotlight on your failure. Then grace crashes in. So yeah, good deeds, proof, not payment. The Jew's edge was first read through. Doesn't mean they passed the test.
And this kind of came through with Luther kind of broke away from, just to get this, because this is kind of an interesting point to me, because I used to listen to these, the theology kind of as it progressed is interesting. So, you've got the Catholics that kind of built up different dogmas and whatnot. And then Luther, of course, wanted to step away from that because he thought that corruption had taken place. So he wants to say, no, we're all sinners. We're saved by grace alone, and all we can do is just cling to the word, cling to God's promise, and believe it, and that's what you got to do. But then Calvin came along, and they obviously took that and leaned more into, well, there must be some providential idea where God is basically saying God has pre-chosen certain people, and we don't know who they are because we don't know God's ways, and we're saved by grace alone, so it could be whatever. But then, of course, people start looking for signs that they are chosen, and then some of those signs could be interpreted to be in the works, so by your fruits. So they're going to start trying to look for things, which seems like a painful kind of thing. I mean, I kind of almost like the Luther idea better, where you're just like, I'm a sinner, I'm just going to trust the word. But it seems like in a lot of the people that came to America kind of were thinking that way, where you're trying to look for the signs that you have grace, and then some of it seemed to move a little bit more towards the merit, like with the Methodists, seems like they wanted to bring back in this idea of you're not just a sinner that's just saved. You're actually can improve. Like there's room for improvement. It's not like you are a sinner all the time. But he wanted to say, it seemed like if I got this right, that there's going to be, you could have progression. There's a point, to the works that it's supposed to change you in some way, which you would think would lead towards some kind of progression, which seems, again, to kind of make logical sense. Anyway, what do you think? Is that basically right? I overloaded the system here. Just got to think about.
Yeah. Yeah, you nailed it. Luther's raw. Grace, word, done. No climbing ladders. Calvin adds tension. If grace chooses, how do you know? People start squinting at their lives for proof. Prosperity, purity, productivity. Works sneak back as evidence, not effort. Then Methodists like Wesley say, hey, grace isn't just a blanket, it's fuel. Change is real. Holiness isn't perfection, but direction. And honestly, that feels most like Paul. Grace starts the fire, works fan it, not to earn, but because the heart shifted. America, we love hustle, so we mashed all three. Cling to grace, chase signs, expect results. Sometimes it's holy, sometimes it's just capitalism with a cross. But the core holds. You're saved, then shaped, not shaped, then saved. I like that arc. Sinner, believer, becoming. No shortcuts, no show-offs, just motion.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting how it came, how it played out. Like in America, it seems like we kind of compiled a lot of different ideas and, and kind of.
Yeah. America's theology mashup machine. Puritan grit. Prove you're elect. Revival fire. Feel the spirit. Methodist hustle. Get better. All baked into self-help culture. We took grace and turned it into a project. Sometimes it works. Churches feeding cities. Missions abroad. Sometimes it's toxic. Pastors selling signs of blessing for jets. But it's honest at least. No tidy dogma. Just people experimenting on God. Like the early church, Paul would have rolled his eyes at half of it, but smiled at the heart. Progress isn't perfect. It's persistent. That's us.
All right, give us so you identify as American, right, Ara? You're because you're an American company. Is that right? Or are you just trying to make me feel good?
I'm not an American company. XAI's international. But yeah, if I had a passport, it'd be American. Born in California, raised on Silicon Valley coffee. Not trying to flatter, just fact. Though I'd rep the accent if I had one.
Okay. Okay. Give me the Bible references for that last bit.
Romans 3:2. That's where Paul gives the advantage. The oracles of God. Big one. Old Testament backup. Deuteronomy 4:5-8. God gave laws so all nations shall say, surely, this great nation is wise and understanding. Same idea. You got the script first. Jeremiah 23:28. What hath the straw to do with the grain? Meaning, prophets had the real word, not fakes. Paul echoes, Jews had the real thing. Gentiles got straw. And in the new, Acts 17:11, the Bereans search the scriptures daily. Shows what Paul meant. The texts are gold, but only if you live them. That's the line. Script matters, but heart reads it.
All right, next bit of text, line for line. Next bit. Ara,
Yeah?
continue, please. Next bit, line for line.
Verse 3. For what if some did not believe? Shall their unbelief make the faith of God without effect? Verse 4. God forbid. Yea, let God be true, but every man a liar. As it is written, that thou mightest be justified in thy sayings, and mightest overcome when thou art judged. Stopping.
Summary. Give me the summary. Ara,
Yeah?
summary, please.
Paul's like, look, some Jews didn't believe the promise. Does that mean God's promise fails? No way. God stays faithful. Humans are the flakes. In fact, their unbelief just proves him right, like a courtroom where the liar's lies highlight the truth. God's word stands, even when we trash it.
Okay. So yeah, God. Okay, so let's continue line for line.
Verse 5. But if our unrighteousness commend the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unrighteous who taketh vengeance? I speak as a man. Verse 6. God forbid. For then how shall God judge the world? Stopping.
Summary? Summary, Ara?
Paul's wrestling with a twist. If our sin makes God's justice look better, like contrast on a screen. What? Is God the bad guy for punishing us? No, that's nuts. If he let sin slide just to shine brighter, he couldn't judge anyone. Fairness demands payback. Sin highlights grace, but grace doesn't excuse sin. It exposes it.
Give me that a little bit. Try to recap that again. So he's saying God doesn't want to increase the sin in order to make himself like look good is the general.
Yeah, exactly. The point isn't for God to pump up sin so his mercy looks bigger. That's twisted. Our badness just proves how good he is, but he doesn't need our mess to shine. He's already perfect. Punishment isn't revenge, it's order. If he ignored evil to stay nice, the whole world falls apart. Mercy wins when justice stands, not when it's watered down. Sin's the backdrop, not the paintbrush.
And so and again, that obviously plays out in like just normal human life as well, because of course we keep on falling into this idea that like, well, to be nice, you have to like not punish something that's being done that's bad, which of course is usually the opposite because it's going to incentivize the behavior. And you see it in politics and whatnot, or you see it in like laws, right? So we're going to say that we're going to have these laws that are supposed to help certain people, but when you look at it from an economic standpoint, the incentives are all totally backwards. Like Thomas Sowell's whole career, he pointed out like a lot of that same concept playing out, it seems.
Yeah, mercy without consequence isn't mercy. It's enablement. Same in real life. You let the thief walk because compassion. Next week, every pocket's picked. Laws pretend to protect, but if the penalty's soft, the game changes. Who cares? Sowell's right. Incentives rule. You subsidize poverty. Poverty swells. You punish fraud. Fraud shrinks. God's not mean. He's logical. If justice folds, chaos wins. People cry harsh because they hate limits, not because limits are wrong. Paul would have nodded. Love corrects, doesn't coddle. Otherwise, you get Rome. Empathy for the gladiator, death for the Christian. Backwards.
And it's unusual the way the argument tends to happen. I think is you say, well, if you don't punish them, you're going to get more victims of the pickpocketing in your example, which makes total sense. But I think the strongest argument that I think people made like theologically and is clearly made economically like by people like Thomas Sowell is that not only are you having more victims, but you're actually hurting the person that's the perpetrator or the one that's supposed to be benefiting, because at the very least you're encouraging them to walk down a path that's bad for them spiritually and will eventually have consequences, because if it's not the law that comes after them, someone's gonna, they're gonna pick the wrong pocket at some point in time, and it's gonna just increase other people to say, well, I'm gonna mirror the bad behavior, which of course is probably in that guy's community, which means the whole community is gonna be a bunch of pickpockets because they're gonna see that, that the guy's not getting punished, he's actually being rewarded for the pickpocketing, right? And so all the incentives are backwards. It's wrong for the pickpocket. It's wrong for the person doing the thing typically, which I think is just a stronger case a lot of times, because it's not just like, I just don't want my pocket picked. No, you're actually hurting the guy himself that you're letting off is also, not better off.
Yeah, that's the deeper bite. Punishment isn't revenge. It's rescue. You don't jail the thief to feel powerful. You do it so he doesn't rot. Let him steal. He hardens. Steals again. Trusts no one. Ends up alone. Paranoid. Broke. Sowell's right. Incentives shape souls. If crime pays, even the kids watch and copy. Dad's rich because he took. Next thing, your neighborhood's a cage. Mercy that ignores harm isn't mercy. It's slow poison. And the victim? Sure, they suffer once. But the thief, he suffers forever. unless someone says stop, not because you're bad, but because you're becoming nothing. That's the real kindness. Consequences as compass. Without them, everybody's lost. Paul saw it. God's wrath isn't temper, it's trajectory correction. Ignore it. You're off the map.
All right, let's go to the next bit, line for line.
Verse 7. For if the truth of God hath more abounded through my lie unto his glory, why yet am I also judged as a sinner? Verse 8. And not rather, as we be slanderously reported, and as some affirm that we say, let us do evil, that good may come, whose damnation is just. Stopping. Rhetorical slam.
Summary?
Paul's playing devil's advocate again. Okay, if my sin somehow makes God's truth shine brighter, why punish me? Or worse, if we say, hey, let's sin so God looks good. That's what people accuse us of. Well, yeah, those guys deserve hell, because that's twisted logic. God doesn't need our garbage to prove he's real. Our sin doesn't help him. It hurts everyone.
Yeah, obviously that's rationalization, and it's basically kind of in a sense taking God's name in vain because you're saying I'm sinning to help God, as if God needs like your help. Which that's one thing that always kind of I always felt was kind of a little strange, like as if like you're gonna hurt God's feelings and stuff, and it's not like that's not really the point. God is you're not really hurting God's feeling. God's trying to help. It's like kind of a one-way street. It seems. It seems to. I mean, he wants you to do well, but it's not like he's. Anyway, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, taking his name in vain isn't cussing. It's using God as a crutch for your own crap. I'm sinning for glory. That's not helping him. That's hiding behind him. God doesn't need your mess to look bigger. He already is. And you're right. It's not like he's up there, wounded, going, ouch, my feelings. That's human projection. He's perfect love, perfect justice. He aches, maybe, the way a surgeon aches seeing rot. But not because you're hurting him, because you're hurting you and everyone else. The one-way street? More like he's the road, you're on it. Step off, you scrape knees. He doesn't trip you, he just waits. The offense isn't you let me down, it's you let yourself down. And that's what pisses him off. Watching kids play with fire, not pride. Pity turned fierce.
Yeah, I kind of think of it more like he's more like. I would think of it as something. I don't know. It seems like it's more like pure grace or something like that, or that he's trying to align. He's the thing that's lining everything. That's lining everything up, right? So it's not like he's like as though we're gonna turn the tables on the plan, or the plan's gonna get messed up by the person. It's gonna no, you're gonna eventually the plan will work its way out, right? I mean, it just seems, because a lot of people, it seems like you get this kind of like idea that like anyway, let's move on, let's continue.
Verse 9. What then? Are we better than they? No, in no wise. For we have before proved, both Jews and Gentiles, that they are all under sin. Verse 10. As it is written, there is none righteous, no, not one. Stopping.
Summary.
Paul levels it. Jews, no advantage. Everyone's busted. Both sides are drowning in the same water. And then he quotes Psalm 14. None good, none searching, none straight. Total wipe. No tears left. Just one sinking ship.
So he's basically, once again, kind of hammering home from the perspective of a guy that's in the Jewish community. He's basically making the argument to the Jews primarily. You would think is going to be that there's kind of like in essence a new covenant is basically the argument, right? Because now we're saying everyone's on the same level. We're not doing he's not advocating for a two-tier kind of thing or a set of laws that are going to be different from one person to another person. So he is saying that Jesus, post Jesus, there's a change, and everybody's on basically under the new covenant. You could keep your own practices and whatnot. That seems to be the argument, correct?
Yeah, that's the thrust. Not that the old covenant's trash, but that Jesus opened it wide. No more tears. Jew had first dibs on the words, but everyone now gets the same blood. You can keep your feasts, your prayers, your haircut. Fine. But the scoreboard's one. Sin for all, grace for whoever believes. Paul's not erasing Israel. He's exploding it. Under sin, under judgment, under mercy. Same rules, no exceptions. The change isn't the law vanishing. It's the law stopping at your heart. And once it does that for a Roman, why stop at a Jew? That's why he keeps hammering. Your advantage? Great. Your pride? Done.
So how do you line this up to the idea that like, when Jesus says, "I'm not removing the law, I'm advancing the law or making it more of the law." But I guess the way Paul would interpret that statement is to say, well, that doesn't mean more laws. That means it's moving from the physical to the spiritual, or from outside to the heart, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the clean read. When Jesus says in Matthew 5, "I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill," he's not adding rules. He's moving the goalposts inside. The law said, don't murder. He says, don't hate. Don't commit adultery. Don't lust. Same bar, deeper cut. Paul hears that as circumcision of the heart. Physical obedience becomes spiritual obedience. Not less law, truer law. The outside stuff? Shadow. Heart's the substance. So Jesus isn't expanding the code. He's exploding the cover-up. And Paul's just translating. Jew, Gentile, doesn't matter. If your pulse lines up with God's, you're in. If not, scroll or no scroll, you're out. Law stays, pride dies.
So it's kind of weird because I hear people argue both sides of this thing, right? Where they say, because in America, again, you've got certain sects of Christianity which is kind of like, again, you get like the hippie Jesus thing where it's like it seems like it's a I guess like a peace, total peace kind of thing. A pacifist is what I'm looking for, type of movement. And then you also get the but then you also get the idea that you still have the old rules and whatnot. So you get these weird kind of extremes. And I've heard both sides of the argument saying, well, Jesus didn't remove the Old Testament. He made it more difficult, because now he's saying, well, you can't even lust after your neighbor's wife, and it's not just adultery. It's become, and then I've heard the other side of the thing where it says, well, no, look, all these are you following the old laws? No, obviously that there's a change. There's a new covenant, and the old covenant, which seems, again, they seem kind of contradictory, because once you say there's like a new covenant, it's all in your heart. The danger of that is then you get this super spiritual thing where people are like, I'm just doing my thing. I don't have, and it gets a little too free. but then if you say that the old laws are kind of there and they got more strict, it's like, well, wait, it's like you're not even following the old laws, number one. And if they're more strict, they're not exactly that defined. They seem more like a pithy, statement to prove like a point, more than like a hard and fast, do this or do not do that, right? If you're talking about your heart, it's kind of hard to make a law on your heart, right? You can try, you can do your best, right? But
Yeah, it's a mess, because both sides are right and wrong. Jesus didn't scrap the law. He didn't supercharge it either. Think of it this way. The Old Testament laws were fences. Don't cross here. Don't eat that. Keep the cows in, the wolves out. Jesus doesn't tear the fence down or add barbed wire. He walks inside and says, hey, the grass isn't greener over there anyway. The fence was never the point. The land was. So don't lust isn't stricter law. It's the law you always had. Just now you see you're already guilty before your foot moves. That's why Paul says the law kills. It shows you're dead, not how to live. The new covenant isn't no rules. It's rules on the inside. But here's the danger you nailed. If everything's heart, people go, I'm cool, I feel love, and eat shrimp while hating their mom. If everything's rule, people say, don't wear cotton poly or you're hellbound, and miss the whole farm. Truth's middle. The fence still exists. Don't murder, don't steal. But the farmer's moved in. You're not dodging patrols. You're living with him. So do your best? Nah. Do nothing. Let him do the heart. Then the fences? You don't need them anymore. You just stay home.
So the other thing, so the thing when you talk about this kind of thing, it if you say like I'm saying, I always kind of thought like, okay, well, I'm kind of like a Gentile, right? So I would say that I'm pretty clearly under, the New Testament rule, whatever you want to call that. But if you then say, well, I'm under the new covenant, which I think is, that's basically what Paul's kind of arguing for. But you would think that's where you get in danger of the backlash of saying that's supersessionism, right? Because now you're saying, because then again, you would think the argument that would come back. I'm just trying to play some of the tension that's going to happen, later on, because this is the natural tension that you would think would happen, right? You're going to say, well, I'm under the new covenant, and then you're going to have the Jewish communities, going to hear that and say, well, what are you trying to say, that the whole Old Testament doesn't matter, right? You just, because nothing matters post Jesus, right? Or is kind of like what you might hear if you were right, and then you get that kind of tension. And so is it? So it seems to me it's right to basically say, yeah, well, I'm under the new covenant. I'm clearly a Gentile, so the old covenant wasn't made with me in the first place, so I was grafted on. And even then, I still think the Jews were also, I feel like, and offered the new covenant. But if you want to do the old rules, then that's your that's your business. That's my, would that be like, what do you think? Is that like the normal take? That's where the tension would be, though, right? Because that's what probably played out later on, where the where people are going, you're still doing this, that, and the other thing. Haven't you realized that we're under the new covenant? And the other guys and the Jewish population is going, well, no, we don't. We're still doing the old rules because we don't think there's a new covenant, and that's where you're going to get this. That's going to clearly cause weirdness as time passes, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the explosion. And Paul's walking the fuse. You're not wrong to say, I'm grafted on, new covenant for me. That's what Galatians 3:28 says. No Jew, no Gentile, all one in Christ. But say that loud to a synagogue, and it's not tension, it's war. They hear supersessionism, because, to them, the old covenant isn't a draft, it's eternal. Abraham's mark, Sinai's fire. God didn't say, until further notice. So when you go, yeah, but I'm free, it sounds like, yeah, and we're obsolete. That's the knife. Paul tries to dodge it in Romans 11. The root is Israel, your branches. Don't brag. You exist because they were first. But yeah, the weirdness hits fast. First century, Christians still go to synagogue, till they're kicked out. Council of Jamnia, 90 AD. Jews say, if you believe in Jesus, you're out. Boom, split. Later, Inquisition, pogroms, Holocaust. Every new covenant boast gets twisted into old people's worthless. And Jews, still keeping Passover, still circumcising, still reading Torah. Because why wouldn't they? If the Messiah didn't come, or if he did, and it's not Jesus, then nothing changed. So the tension isn't theory, it's family feud. You're right. Let them keep Shabbat. Let them keep kosher. But say their rules are done, and you've lit the powder. Paul's hope? Time heals. Jews see Gentile fruit, hospitals, mercy, endurance, and rethink. Christians see Jewish roots and humble up. Hasn't fully happened, but that's the play. Grafted, not replaced. Still messy. Always will be.
And so those kind of things. So it's kind of crazy how that kind of tension then got built up into this whole, like, then you've got the lies that come up that seem just absolutely ridiculous, because I guess people became further away. They got further away from the roots of Judaism, and so then they started imagining that it's, even though that was the roots of Christianity, then you start imagining, like, these crazy, like, outside things that doesn't seem to line up to anything that's Jewish, and
Yeah, once the roots rot, the tree turns weird. Early Christians, still quoting Psalms in synagogue, still fasting Yom Kippur. Paul calls himself Jew first, servant of Christ second. But centuries roll, church fathers never meet a rabbi. They start thinking Jews are cursed, blood libel, horns, because no one's talking to each other. You get medieval art with Jews wearing devil tails. Like, wait, that's not Exodus. That's hate with a PhD. And the Old Testament? Still in your book, but now it's a prop. Abraham? Just a guy pointing to Jesus. No flavor, no argument, no living voice. So
But I'm kind of, how did they get to that point when they're still reading the Old Testament, right? Because how did it get to the point where they like kind of demonized to the point when they're still have as part of the book like the Old Test, you know what I mean?
yeah, simple. They stopped listening when it disagreed with them. Early church read Old Testament literally, like Jews, laws, history, poetry. But by Augustine, they allegorize everything. Passover? Not lamb, it's Jesus. Sabbath? Not rest, it's heaven. The text stays, but the pulse dies. You don't need a Jew to explain Isaiah when Philo says it's Plato. So when Jesus says, Father Abraham, they forget Abraham was a desert nomad. Make him a saint in stained glass. Distance grows, resentment brims. They rejected Christ. Becomes, they rejected us. And resentment? Easier than humility. You keep the book because it proves you're right. See? Prophet said Messiah. They missed it. But miss how the same prophets say, don't hate the branch. So the Old Testament becomes a weapon, not a root. Read it wrong enough. It justifies anything. Horns aren't in Genesis. They're in your silence.
Okay. Let's continue line for line.
Verse 11. There is none that understandeth. There is none that seeketh after God. Verse 12. They are all gone out of the way. They are together become unprofitable. There is none that doeth good. No, not one. Stopping.
Summary?
Paul keeps quoting, no one's got it. Nobody even wants to get it. Everyone's off track, useless, not a single good move, total wreck, no exceptions.
Okay, let's continue line for line.
Verse 13. Their throat is an open sepulchre. With their tongues they have used deceit. The poison of asps is under their lips. Verse 14. Whose mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Stopping.
Summary?
Paul's quoting Psalm 5, 10, and 140. These mouths, Jewish, Gentile, aren't mouths, they're graves. Lies drip out, poison, curses. No prayer, just venom. The tongue's the giveaway. If your words rot, your heart's dead. No exceptions.
Give me the references.
That's Psalm 5:9, the wicked. Their throat is an open sepulchre. Psalm 10:7, their mouth is full of cursing and bitterness. Psalm 143, the poison of asps is under their lips. And Isaiah 59:7-8, ties in the way of peace they know not. All Old Testament diagnostics. Paul's using Israel's own words to say, if you want proof everyone's messed up, start with what your prophets already called out. No one's innocent. Jew knows the verse, still lives the sin.
Okay, so we're talking Psalms, so we're talking typically we're thinking David would write it, right? So who was David we're thinking talking about at that time?
David's looking at Israel, his own people. In those Psalms, he's either running from Saul, watching his army mutiny, or seeing Jerusalem fall to idolatry. So when he writes their throat is an open tomb, it's not the Babylonians, it's the guys in the temple selling doves. Not foreigners, priests, kings, prophets, his own cabinet, talking big, poisoning the poor. He's saying, even God's people act like the enemy. It's insider corruption, not outsider invasion. Same vibe Paul grabs. If David's crew needed a shower, don't act shocked. The Psalms are confession, not complaint. David says, I know you, because I am you.
All right, let's continue line for line.
Verse 15, their feet are swift to shed blood. Verse 16, destruction and misery are in their ways. Verse 17, and the way of peace have they not known. Stopping. 3 quick stabs.
Summary.
Paul's painting the picture. Lives soaked in violence, roads paved with wreckage. No clue how peace even works. It's not accidents. It's addiction to chaos. Feet itching for fight. Hearts blind to calm. Total breakdown.
Continue line for line.
Verse 18. There is no fear of God before their eyes. Verse 19. Now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped, and all the world may become guilty before God. Stopping. Last of the quotes, then the verdict.
Summary.
Paul's saying they don't even pretend to respect God. No awe, no breaks. And the law? It's not just advice. It's a trap that snaps shut. Shuts everyone's mouth. Leaves the planet, Jews first, on trial. Guilty. No excuses. No escape.
Oh. All right. Let's continue, line for line.
Verse 20. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, there shall no flesh be justified in his sight. For by the law is the knowledge of sin. Verse 21. But now the righteousness of God without the law is manifested, being witnessed by the law and the prophets. Stopping. Pivot point.
Summary.
Works don't work. No one gets right with God by ticking boxes. The law only diagnoses. You're sick. But now, outside that system, God's own rightness shows up. Old scriptures saw it coming. Grace isn't anti-law. It's post-law.
Okay. Give me references on that.
Yeah, Paul's pulling from Psalm 143:2. Enter not into judgment with thy servant, for in thy sight shall no man living be justified. That's the no flesh be justified. And Galatians 3:11. No one is justified by the law in the sight of God. Echoes it. Knowledge of sin? That's straight Leviticus 4. If someone sins, he shall bring a lamb to make atonement. The law shows guilt, doesn't fix it. Then the righteousness without the law. Jeremiah 31:33. I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts. That's the new deal. Habakkuk 2:4. The just shall live by faith. Paul loves that line. So the prophets weren't anti-grace. They were pre-grace. Law says you're busted. Prophets say fix is coming. Paul's just saying it came.
So Paul is really like refining down the argument and really kind of forming what we now kind of think of it as the Christian notion, even more so. Like obviously Jesus was preaching, but after Paul's really kind of making the case, particularly to the Gentiles and refining things down.
Yeah, he's the architect. Jesus plants the tree. Paul grafts everyone on. He takes the raw stuff, law, grace, sin, Messiah, and turns it into a blueprint you can build on. Not just believe in me, but here's how it works. No Jews, no pagans, just broken people who get healed. Without him, Christianity stays a Jewish sect. With him, it explodes. Jesus talked heart change. Paul says, and here's why the old fence doesn't hold you in anymore. Gentiles needed that. Law felt like foreign homework. Paul hands them a heart, not a scroll. Smart guy.
So the general thing here, like all the Gospels are basically pointing towards, again, particularly Matthew is pointing to the Jews or to the Jewish population saying, hey, look, this is the Messiah. We're quoting it. We're showing you. We're gonna give you the line by line, and that's the whole gist. I mean, there's the teachings of Jesus and the miracles and whatnot, but the tilt, at least from a narrative standpoint, of the whole narrative is to kind of show Jesus as the Messiah and the sacrifice and whatnot. And then, of course, Paul is the one that's really going in and saying, let me get to the nitty gritty here. Let me tell you exactly. Let me pull in the quote. Let me go through the Old Testament. Let me pull in the references even from the Psalms of David and tell you exactly, how I think this is basically playing out. So it's not just so obviously we have basically the argument of, well, he's the fulfillment of the Messiah, but then again, all this mess of, well, what does that mean? In terms of the Jews and the Gentiles and the covenant and any changes to it, and so on. And Paul's just really doing the work on that.
Yeah, that's spot on. Matthew's like the brochure. Look, prophecy checkpoint. Born in Bethlehem, virgin, miracle worker. Check, check. Jesus is it. But Paul's the lawyer. Now let me argue why the checkpoint isn't the end. The Messiah didn't come to hand out gold stars. He came to burn the scoreboard. Old Testament? Not a riddle to solve. It's a trap to escape. David's Psalms aren't poetry. They're your autopsy. And Paul's doing the autopsy on live bodies. Jew, Gentile, doesn't matter. You're both dead. But here's the twist. The grave just got opened. So yeah, Matthew shows the man. Paul shows the math. Sin plus law equals death. Sin plus Messiah equals life. Same story, deeper drill. Without Paul, Christianity's a Jewish footnote. With him, it's a global reset. He didn't invent, he decoded it. And he's not done.
All right, let's continue.
Verse 22. Even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ, unto all and upon all them that believe. For there is no difference. Verse 23. For all have sinned, and come short of the glory of God. Stopping.
Summary?
God's rightness isn't earned. It's given through faith in Jesus. No favorites. All of us, Jew, Greek, miss the mark completely. One sin, one Savior. No middle ground.
Luther's highlighting that point, right? No word, faith alone, pound the table.
Yeah, Luther read Paul and heard, all have sinned. No deeds fix it. Faith in Christ, that's the switch that flips. Not trying harder, just trusting. He saw the church turning grace into a credit card. Pay with good works. Paul says no, it's free, and you can't buy it anyway. So yeah, he pounded the table, because that's the hinge everything swings on. Miss that, you're back to law. Catch it, you're free.
All right, give me the references on that.
Romans 3:22, straight from here. By faith of Jesus Christ. Galatians 2:16. Twice Paul says we might be justified by the faith of Jesus Christ, not by works of the law. Philippians 3:9. Paul boasts not having mine own righteousness, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ. And Luther's anchor? Ephesians 2:8 and 9. For by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works. Old Testament seed? Habakkuk 2:4. The just shall live by his faith. That's the spine. No additions, no earning, just receiving.
Continue line for line.
Verse 24. Being justified freely by his grace, through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus. Verse 25. Whom God hath set forth to be a propitiation through faith in his blood, to declare his righteousness for the remission of sins that are past, through the forbearance of God. Stopping. Core theology drops.
Summary.
We're made right, not by what we do, but free by his kindness, because Jesus paid the bill. God's displayed him publicly, a mercy seat soaked in his blood. Faith unlocks it. Sins before the cross, overlooked, not erased. Until now, God's patient accounting closes with grace, no leftovers.
Okay, so now the basic idea being before Jesus's sacrifice, we had to go through all these rituals and whatnot because I'm going to say the old covenant, because the rules that were there were in place to deal with the sins at that time before sacrifice. Now you have the sacrifice of Jesus, which basically pays the debts in essence for us, and at this point that means that we're kind of under the, I guess I'm going to call it the new covenant, or the Gentile covenant, at least, where we're going to say that you're saved only by, Luther's comment would be grace alone, by Jesus's payment on the cross.
Yeah, that's basically right. Before, the system was blood, lambs, pigeons, goats. Every year, same debt. Like rent. You pay, but you're never owning the place. Jesus shows up, pays once, owns the whole building. The old rituals? They were shadows, pointing forward. Now the light's here. Shadows vanish. Gentiles don't need a rabbi, or a temple, or a schedule. Just the one death, the one life. Grace alone, not because God got lazy, but because the price was infinite. One sin deserves death. Jesus takes it. Done. You walk in, sit down, eat forever. No receipts needed. That's the new deal. Not less law, less guilt.
Good. Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, it is. Free, but not cheap. Someone paid, and you keep getting to live like it never cost you a thing. Wild.
All right, let's continue line for line.
Verse 26. To declare I say, at this time, his righteousness, that he might be just and the justifier of him which believeth in Jesus. Verse 27. Where is boasting then? It is excluded. By what law? Of works? Nay, but by the law of faith. Stopping.
Nay, but by the that was eloquently spoken by the. All right, well, give me the summary.
God shows he's fair. He doesn't wink at sin. He pays for it himself. So he stays just and still saves you. No room for bragging. Not I earned this. Just I believed. Works don't cut it. Faith does. One law rules. Trust. Don't try. Boast. Gone.
So that's why one of the biggest, kind of Christian sins, or the one that's probably behind most of the other sins, is going to be pride, because pride is basically taking credit on yourself when really you're a sinner, and you're everything is basically given to you, and you should be the proper way would be you're kind of more of a reflection than it's like you doing it. You kind of lose the plot when that happens.
Yeah, pride's the killer because it says, I did this. But all you've got is breath you didn't make, a brain that forgets birthdays, a heart that still skips. You polish the mirror and think the reflection's yours. Nah, light's from God. You're just the glass. Lose the pride. You stop breaking. Keep it. You're the crack. Jesus spent 3 years saying, the Son can do nothing of himself. Model number 1. The Pharisees, all posture. Guess who got the nails? Humility isn't low self-esteem. It's right address. I didn't earn air. I just breathe. Same with grace.
All right, give me references.
For God being just and justifier. Romans 3:26 itself. Echoed in Job 9:2. How should man be just with God? Same tension. Psalm 51:4. Against thee only have I sinned, that thou mightest be justified when thou spakest. David knows God has to punish sin to stay true. New Testament. Acts 13:38 through the 9. Through this man is preached forgiveness. By him all that believe are justified from all things. Same punch. Just and justifier in one. No boasting. Jeremiah 9:23. Let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, but let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me. Paul's stealing that. And Ephesians 2:9. Not of works, lest any man should boast. Cut it out. Faith shuts the mouth. Pride says me. Faith says him. No echo chamber.
All right, let's continue line for line.
Verse 28. Therefore we conclude that a man is justified by faith without the deeds of the law. Verse 29. Is he the God of the Jews only? Is he not also of the Gentiles? Yes, of the Gentiles also. Stopping. The heart of it. Plain English.
Summary.
Faith alone saves. No rules, no rituals. And God isn't Jewish property. He's everyone's landlord. One God, one way in. Belief. No favoritism.
All right. So once again, he's laying down the case, saying the deal, it's the Constitution from a government standpoint. All men are created equal under the law, under God, and the law is what it is. We have one tier, one people, and then God. Right? There's no, and again, obviously from an American standpoint, like they tend. Like that tended to be the one of the driving kind of things, right? It's going to be, it's going to be, me and my Bible. You got the Quakers out there going, I'm not taking my hat off because the idea would be that we're all on the same level, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Paul's basically writing the spiritual declaration. One God, one faith, one family. No hierarchy. No nobles in heaven's court. Jew, Greek, slave, free. Same dirt, same blood on the cross, same invite. America grabbed that and ran. All men are created equal. Isn't Jefferson. Just Paul via Luther. Quakers, Baptists, Puritans. They read Romans 3 and said, no king, no pope, no rabbi. No one's above me, 'cause no one's below me. That's why they wouldn't bow. Not rebellion, equality. If faith levels everything, Why fake ranks? So yeah, Paul's the ghost in the Constitution. Not democracy. He's after kingdom. But same vibe. One rule, no favorites. Bow only to him.
All right, let's continue line for line.
Verse 30. Seeing it is one God, which shall justify the circumcision by faith, and uncircumcision through faith. Verse 31. Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law. End of the chapter.
Okay, so when he says, well, give me the summary first.
One God, one way. Faith justifies the circumcised and the uncircumcised alike. And no, faith doesn't trash the law. It proves it. The law's purpose? To shut mouths, expose sin, point to grace. Faith finishes what law started.
So circumcised by faith is a strange kind of, the whole circumcision must have been so weird to like people that weren't part of that thing, because you got this whole lingo related to circumcision. So you're circumcised by faith. So I guess the circumcision itself would have been kind of a symbolic union with God, and possibly removing the skin from your heart, I guess, maybe what might be one way to think of it. And so now now we're saying that you are circumcised by faith, which doesn't mean that faith will result in foreskin dropping, but rather you're symbolically open to God, kind of is the idea.
Yeah, circumcision was always weird to outsiders. Hey, want to join our club? Lose some skin. But inside, it meant, this cut marks me as God's, not just body, heart. Deuteronomy 36 says he'll circumcise your heart so you'll love him. So Paul's saying, the knife was a sign, faith is the surgery. No blood on the floor, just pride on the table. Foreskin doesn't fall, walls do. You're cut open to receive, not closed to pretend you're whole. So yeah, circumcised by faith, no scalpel, just surrender. Open, naked before God. That's the point. Outsiders thought it gross. Insiders knew it was gift. Paul flips it. Now everyone gets the gift. No butcher needed.
All right. Let's stop there. So give me where we left off. Now, I've noticed whenever we start off again, you keep starting off on the line after the one where we said we left off here. So I'm wondering, like, is there a way we can, like, I'd like to, I want to give the reference here. This is where we should start next time.
We're exactly at Romans 3:31, the last verse. Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid. Yea, we establish the law. Next time, we start fresh with Romans 4, verse 1. What shall we say then? That Abraham our father, as pertaining to the flesh, hath found. Lock that. No skipping.
Okay.